Jason Momoa has come out with an axe collaboration with the Nash Motorcycle Company. Now, if you don't know who Jason Momoa is, here's a bit of a reminder. He was one of the bearded horse riders on Game of Thrones. His name was Khal Drogo. He's also known for defending Amber Heard after she shat in Jack Sparrow's bedsheets, lest we forget. But he's also in Aquaman as the Aquaman. Now, Jason is a bit of an axe man. He throws tomahawks, he swings axes, which is admirable. He's also a motorcycle rider, and he's a big motorcycle enthusiast. So I guess it was just in the cards that eventually he was going to come out with a motorcycle company and do a collaboration for an axe. And that's exactly where we land ourselves today, looking at his axe collaboration. Now, I'll be forthright, I had no idea this axe even existed until it was sent to me by a coworker of mine, and I just decided right then and there, as soon as I saw it, that I was just going to tear it apart on video. Now, starting off, when I googled Jason Momoa axe, one of the first things that I saw that popped up was a clip of Jason Momoa blindly throwing a tomahawk without looking over a target and into a tent. Let's go ahead and roll that clip.
It's not essential to look, Wolfie. You just have to be able to aim, let it go.
And there it goes, straight over the target, right into the tent. I don't know whether or not that tent was occupied. If there were people in it, that would have been a very bad day. You could see it sail right over that target and go right into the tent. So, hey, you know, axes, a lot like firearms, are lethal instruments. Just going to go right out and say it. You have to be smart when you're using an axe. If you're just throwing something around without looking, it's probably not one of the best ideas that you could possibly do. Anyways, moving on, let's go ahead and take a peek at the Nash Motorcycle Company Jason Momoa axe collaboration, shall we? Now, we pulled up the website, the Momoa X Nash X Paths collaborations. Per his enthusiasm. I'm quoting this directly off of the website, by the way, in case you're just listening to this and you're not necessarily seeing it on your screen. Per his enthusiasm, we tapped into Jason Momoa's passion for the classic late 1930s era motor affectionately known to American motorcycle gearheads as the knucklehead motor. This is the same engine that Jason's personal hand-built bike is powered by. Working together in a labor of love with Kevin Teach Bass and Tabor Nash helped to bring Jason's durable handcrafted timeless keepsakes to fruition and to you. To celebrate the limited nature of this side project, we invite all buyers to collaborate with a photo on a rising app called Paths. This is so all owners one day can look back and appreciate the similar tastes of their peers. Wow. Now, what a good intro to this axe collaboration. Now, as we scroll down, we can go ahead and see the lineup. There is a bunch of Momoa collaborations on the Nash Motorcycle Company website. So, let's go ahead and get into, the 36-inch knuckle axe, shall we? Okay, so I'm just going to come right out and say it. If you can't see this and you're listening to this on a podcast, this axe has a relatively ornate head to it. First impressions, it's a little bit of a style choice. It has a 36-inch handle on it, made out of hickory, I would hope. Let's go ahead and read this. Yes, it is made out of American hickory. Well, at least they got that right. I'm assuming they put the handle up on a lathe, which is what you put handles on, or pieces of wood, and it spins really fast. You have lathe tools. People use this a lot to shape tomahawk handles, or if you have a copy lathe, that's how you actually make axe handles in large-scale production. But they threw it up on there. They started to spin it, and they hit it with a blowtorch in different sections going all the way up the handle, which made it look like a coral snake or one of those sea snakes. You know, that's absolutely a stylistic choice. I don't necessarily think that it would be my cup of tea. As a matter of fact, it is definitely not my cup of tea. You see this style choice done a lot on tomahawk handles, especially vintage, traditional tomahawk handles. A handle that's short enough where you don't really have to worry about the actual torsion forces on the handle, and it's not supposed to flex like a super long axe handle is. Now, when it comes to charring wood, there is an inherent risk associated with that, i.e. you're going to change the behavior and the property of the wood. I don't know if you've heard about anybody fire hardening anything before, but sometimes people will take arrow shafts and spear shafts and different things like that, perhaps even clubs in certain instances, and they will introduce a part of it, i.e. the head of it, to a source of heat, whether that be a blowtorch or a campfire. They'll expose it to heat, they'll cool it off, and they'll do whatever process they have invented for themselves to fire harden that piece of wood. And it makes it a lot more tough, durable, and hard than the rest of the wood, just because the heat and the cooling process of it actually strengthens the wood. But I'm not going to say that that necessarily happened in this handle, but it definitely does give the potential to have been fire hardened in different areas. An axe handle is supposed to flex, especially an axe handle that is 36 inches long. You want an axe handle to flex. You do. That's just how it is supposed to behave. The modern trend of putting like those super wide and thick axe handles, we're talking like 3/4 to an inch thick, maybe even more in some cases, handles on an axe is just the bane of modern proper axemanship. Everybody always thinks, well, the thicker the handle, the more durable the axe handle is going to be, right? Well, you would be wrong, because the axe head, where it connects to the handle, is subject to an insane amount of forces. That handle right there, when it connects to the head, all those forces right there are compounded right where those two materials meet. It would be like holding a piece of spaghetti with a pair of pliers, and then you put flexion on it, and where's it going to break? Probably right where it's connected to the pliers. That's exactly what we're talking about here. Now, if you have a super thick axe handle, and you start to crank on it after it's embedded into a piece of wood, that handle's not going to flex, and it's going to flex and break right where you don't want it to, i.e. where the handle meets the head. Now, if you have a thin, narrow, properly designed axe handle, and you embed it into a piece of wood, and you go to flex it, the handle is going to flex and work as a leaf spring, so to speak, a little bit, and it's going to prevent the whole handle from snapping right at that head. I have personally used thick axe handles that have broken, and they've all broken right at that head. Now, if you have a thin axe handle, I guarantee that if you use it properly, that thing is not going to break anywhere near as fast as one of those super thick axe handles. Now, I say that flexion is an important part of a properly designed axe handle because if you have a bunch of different materials or properties of the wood, i.e. burnt and unburnt wood, working in tandem, then hey, that handle's not going to behave the way you want, and it's probably going to break on one of these charred sections. I would be willing to put a serious amount of money on that fact. Could be wrong. Hey, I don't have one of these axes. I will not buy one of these axes. Let's be real. I'm not going to buy one of these axes. I'm just doing a visual analysis from an end user of an axe. Now, I understand that charring an axe handle is also an aesthetic choice. Not to this extent, but there are people out there that are very good at hanging axe handles and axes, myself included, that have charred the wood on these handles. But when it comes to charring the wood in those instances, a good example is Joel from Burr and Bevel Sharpening. If you don't know anything about him, you should definitely look him up. He's a fantastic craftsman and an excellent axeman. I've known him for a long time. But his axes that he does, a lot of the times he will take a blowtorch to the handles that he's working on after the fact, hit the handle with a blowtorch just enough for the grains on that handle to pick up just a little bit of that char, so it accentuates the grain. Especially after you put oil on it, it looks fantastic. Now, that is definitely a stylistic choice. It looks more pleasing to the eye as opposed to just this plain Jane white sapwood handle. More pleasing to the eye. The buyer, at the end of the day, would be more willing to buy that. Looks nice. Whatever you want to do, if that's your cup of tea, go ahead and hit it with that blowtorch, accentuate those grains. Super common tactic. But when you do that, you are not burning the handle to the point where you are altering the way the wood behaves. Now, you're not holding a blowtorch to it to the point where it turns black, like a lot of these sections on this knuckle axe here. Now, that, I would almost guarantee, creates issues, unlike if you do it properly, like just lightly hitting over the surface. Alright, well, that's enough talk on the handle. I'm super not a fan. Whoa, okay, hold on. Look at that. I interrupted myself there. The grain orientation in these handles, even right off the bat, is miserable. That handle has cross grain on it. Wow. I mean, okay, so when it comes to axe handles, if your cutting edge is facing one way. You want all your grains and growth rings to be facing the exact same direction. You want them to be parallel, just like that. If they embed themselves into a piece of wood, all those growth rings right here are going to be sticking in one direction. Now, if you go ahead and you make them perpendicular like this, and the cutting edge is facing the opposite way, if you embed that cutting edge, all those growth rings and grains are going to want to split apart, especially when you go to tug on this axe. It's probably going to split right along the seam of one of those growth rings. You can kind of get away with perpendicular grains when it comes to double bit axes because they're straight handles. There's not going to be any run out. The grains aren't going to end in one part of the handle. They're all going to be facing the same direction, and you'd form more of a leaf spring. You could actually aid yourself in chopping. But when it comes to a single bit axe handle, look at that. You can even see right here on the very back, all that grain run out. Yeah, so if you put any kind of stress on this handle at all, those grains are going to break. And you're going to have a broken handle. Yeah, I don't even have to hold one of these axes in my hand or swing it to know that that handle is going to break very rapidly. Why? Because I've swung a ton of axes. I've built a ton of axes. I'm an end user, and it might not look like it, but I know a little bit about what I'm talking about when it comes to these axes. So moving on. That's been the handle. The handle, I'd give that a score of 2 out of 10. And the only reason it gets a 2 is to some people, it looks like it is a pleasing to the eye type of aesthetic choice. That's the only reason it gets 2 points out of 10. Now let's move on to the head. So we have it pulled up here. We can see a whole lineup of these knuckle axe heads. They are very clearly cast. I'm just going to say that right off the bat. Like, you can see cast lines on this axe head. Ton of cast lines. Oh, yeah, you can see what looks like super shoddy workmanship. Like, I'm not even going to lie. These look visibly like those very cheap Pakistani axe heads that you'd find off of Etsy. A lot of the times you'd see them as like those Norse or Viking or Ragnar axes, and they have the same cast look about them. So I mean, the style choices there. In the very back, you can see those cast knuckles that look like the knuckle on the engine they're talking about, the knucklehead engine. In the very front, I mean, they put a decent grind on these things. It looks like they brought it up to about 8,000 grit. I'm assuming it's going to be around a 30-degree flat grind if I were just to look at this from an outside perspective without seeing one of them right in front of me, which, I mean, it's not a bad grind. It's a pretty do-all edge bevel. And, you know, they finished it pretty well. But the head's... Okay, let's just read what this head is made out of. So down here, I've highlighted it. We have these heads cast, okay, in tool-grade 420 stainless steel. You are correct. Not only are these heads cast, they are cast in 420 stainless steel. Most of the time when it comes to these axe heads, or a high-quality axe in general, you're going to have something like 5150 or 1095 to a lesser extent forged high carbon steel axe heads. Most of the time you don't want a stainless steel as an axe head because the probability of stainless steel chipping on the cutting edge is much, much higher than it would be if you had a high carbon steel axe head. Now, yeah, high carbon does have the potential to rust much quicker than a stainless steel. However, the benefits that you get from a high carbon steel vastly outweigh the negatives, i.e. rusting. All you have to do is just perform proper maintenance, oil it up every once in a while, and rust necessarily isn't an issue. I live in Alaska, surprisingly an extremely humid state. A fork could just look at the outdoors and immediately rust up. So I know very well what it takes to maintain an axe head up here with a bunch of oil. However, when it comes to 420 stainless and just the overall build quality of these heads, I'm just going to show you what I'm talking about. It is a very cheap, terrible choice for axe steels. Okay, so you just have to Google cast 420 stainless steel axe head. Let's just look at what pops up. Yep, so we have a bunch of those tactical, cool sheepdog axes that pop up. Yeah, so you think of like the mid-2010s zombie craze that went out. You remember all those axes that were like neon green and they had spikes and shit all over them? Yeah, so that would be the type of axe that you would normally see cast in 420 stainless steel. It is a very cheap process and steel to work with, so it doesn't take that much money to actually make a final product, and you could mark it up quite a bit, turn a healthy profit, but so it's a money game, I'm assuming, because it's a very cheap process to make. Now, I know that casting axes is a relatively new technology, and a lot of people are doing it. Hardcore hammers, for example, like I have this hardcore hammers axe right here. This was cast steel, so, I mean, do I have an issue with that? No, I don't. The difference that I have is instead of 420 stainless, this axe was cast in 4140 ordnance steel. Why is it called that? Well, 4140 is a steel that's used a lot of the times in big gun barrels, like artillery pieces, battleship barrels, things like that. So I'm not necessarily dogging the process of casting the axe heads. I'm dogging the actual steel choice that is in the axe head. The specs to the head, we have a 4-pound head. The handle, 36 inches. The head length is 8 inches with a 4.5 inch cutting edge for 4 pounds. Let's take a peek at the 24 inch one to see if there is anything different with the head. Okay, we have the 24 inch one, the 24 inch knuckle axe. Did they change anything with the head at all? Nope, 4 pounds. Again, 4 pounds on a 24 inch axe. That is insanity. I have a 24 inch axe right here. This is the Council Tool Woodcraft Pack Axe. And this thing has a 2-pound head. I think this head is slightly too heavy for this length of handle. If it was like a 1.75 pound head on this handle, I'd be able to maneuver this thing a little bit better. But I mean, 2 pounds, this is a pretty good axe. If I were to double this head weight on this length of a handle, that is a dangerous axe. And I'm not saying dangerous as in like, man, that thing is dangerous as hell. That's cool as hell. No, that is a dangerous axe as in it's going to be very hard to control. And the chances of that thing missing what you're trying to swing at and hitting your leg or your shin it increases dramatically. Okay. So it's just an unwieldy axe. I don't even know if that would be a good axe to really throw. I don't throw axes. But a 4-pound head on a 24 inch handle, come on now. Still, this one is $379. That is a ludicrous price for that. At the end of the day, the juice might not be worth the squeeze if you're trying to milk, $380 out of these axes for people. So you have a mediocre head steel, mediocre finish job, casting. Like, yeah, they could polish up the back of the pole. Like, look at this. Okay, we have a polished pole. We have Nash Motor Company stamped on the back, USA, with Jason Momoa's logo, I'm assuming, right there at the very bottom. Yeah, so this thing is like a pig wearing a tuxedo. You can only dress it up so much, but we can see right through that facade. Without even giving a shit about the actual metallurgy, the materials used, let's just look at it from like an aesthetic standpoint. If we look at the Harley Knucklehead motor, we can see some of the exact same stylistic choices, which, I mean, if they're trying to duplicate that, they did a pretty good job with that. That's really where it is. That's where it ends. You have a blade mask on it right there, which, I mean, cool. I'd hope they'd include it for that price. And if somebody came up to me and they're just like, hey, do you think I should buy this axe? I don't think I'd say no quicker in my life. I mean, absolutely not. If you are the type of person that is going to buy one of these axes, I don't think that you'd be the type of person to go out and actually swing an axe in the woods. I'm just going to go flat out and say it. I don't think the type of people that use an axe routinely would be the type of people that would buy this axe. I think this axe and these hammers and this whole lineup is designed for people that really care about the aesthetic appeal of tools over the functionality of the tool. They're the types of people that have super big lifted trucks that never see a speck of dirt in their entire life. They're the types of people that like appearing rugged, yet aren't necessarily rugged in and of themselves. And the worst thing that they have to worry about at the end of the day is burning themselves on their coffee order. The types of people that would probably buy these axes are the types of people that would just show people, look at this axe. And it hangs on their wall. This is a Jason Momoa collab. You know him? Khal Drogo? Game of Thrones? Look at this. It's cool. Never sees any use at all. If you want an axe like this, do yourself a favor. Go on Etsy. Type in cast axe head. And you're probably going to find something very, very similar. There's probably even Pakistani copies of these things already made. They might actually perform better than these Nash Motorcycle Co. collaborations. Who knows? Not necessarily setting themselves up for success here. If you get this axe and it breaks, I'm sorry, I told you so. And if you drop $379 on an axe that's going to perform like a $40 Pakistani axe, then you deserve the axe to break. When you buy one of these axes, if you're the type of person to buy one of these axes, and you want to prove me wrong, and you want to swing this axe at a tree and show me that it can perform the way that it should and the handle won't ever break, more power to you. If you want to drop $380 on an axe that will perform the exact same way as a $40 Chinese or Pakistani axe off of the internet, I'm not going to stop you. However, I will say, I hope you wear a helmet when you go out and you swing this axe. Because when the handle eventually breaks, and the axe head, which is cast out of 420 stainless steel, inevitably flies right back at you, I want you to be able to be protected on the top of your head, so that it might just ding the helmet, and it won't cause you any harm, because then you might retain the cognitive ability to think about your decisions and why you wasted $380 on this axe in the first place. That's everything I have to say about the Nash Motorcycle Company Jason Momoa collaboration.